You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to the Mike on the Right podcast. I am your host, Mike Neal, and yes, I am broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier state. Continue to like, share, subscribe, five-star ratings, tell your friends about this show. It exists for you and because of you. And I am so thankful and grateful for each and every one of you listening and supporting me on this journey. But also, I hope it's educational and that you are enjoying the show. You can see all the episodes. This is episode 31, December 1, 2025 release date. But all the episodes before it you can find at mikeontheright.com, and it's going to take you to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Amazon Music and all the places in which you get your podcasts. We are there. Thank you again so much, and I want to get right into today's episode. It is the Christmas season. And as you heard in last week's episode, I talked a lot about gratitude and thankfulness, and I had a poll that I asked, hey, what do you want to hear about at the Thanksgiving season? And people overwhelmingly said that, but there was a good group of you who also said, hey, I'm still looking for some hard news and commentary. And so you have been patient, and here we are today. Even though it is the beginning of the Christmas season, you can put your tree up and all the different things that are associated with Christmas. There is a lot going on, and it's hard to contain to three things, but we're going to talk about three things today. The first, we're going to talk about the GOP's way ahead. You've been hearing a lot in the news about the direction of the GOP for the 2026 midterms. We're going to talk about that, what it looks like, what it should look like, what are the hindrances in the way. Then we're going to discuss the targeting of the West Virginia National Guard members who are patrolling in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk a little bit about that and ultimately kind of the overall goal and mission of that, and why was the gentleman who perpetrated this cowardly act, why was he here in the first place? And then we're going to talk about a little bit about Indiana. So for my folks that aren't from Indiana, I'm sorry, but we're going to talk about Indiana's early legislative session. What does it look like? What does it mean? Why? And what's the swirl around that? But first, we're going to talk about the first topic, which is the GOP's way ahead. And if you were to ask me a month ago, what do the 2026 midterms look like for Republicans, I would have told you that I think we have solid footing. Of course, the history surrounding a midterm after a presidential win always kind of goes in the direction of the opposite party, but we have seen in the last several elections especially a very segmented, divided America between two sets of ideology. The Republicans and conservatives who believe in conservatism and liberty and, cutting wasteful spending and continuing to build our military and supporting the police and holding the line on radical gender ideology and all the different things that we stand for. And then you have a more liberal or Democrat or left-wing view of America, which is UBU and, continue to increase spending in unrealistic ways, and the entire failed and botched CR, continuing resolution process that they absolutely lost. Between those two things and everything that happened around that fight, I would say the Republicans are going to be great in the U.S. Senate, and the House is going to be tough. It was always going to be tough. And even in the redistricting fight with different states trying to redistrict in different ways, I would have told you that I think the Republicans had a solid shot in 2026 to hold the line, definitely keep the U.S. Senate. And then since then, there has just been, I don't understand what it is, but Republicans are suddenly just absolutely all over the place. Ever since we won the battle on the Schumer shutdown, it's just been pandemonium and chaos, and I don't understand how we are where we are. Because Republicans are certainly fighting for a traditional American values. Nothing is perfect. Republicans are leading the way on those things. But at the end of the day, it's like, I can't believe we are where we are. And you're starting to see some very key Republicans step out of Congress, and you're starting to see, and the media is always attacking Republicans, right? If you're listening to the show today and you do not ascribe to the Republican way of life or conservative way of life. I am so glad you're here. I'm thankful for your listenership. And even though we may disagree, I'm so thankful that we have the opportunity to have civil discourse. But one thing that you cannot deny is that the media typically leans to the left. And so the Republicans are always under attack, in that. But it's to like this nth degree recently, and maybe it's just the Trump effect. It's the everyone talks about the Trump derangement syndrome, and even though something may have nothing to do with President Trump, but it's always kind of applied to that situation because Republicans, he's a Republican, so all Republicans, are, admonished for that. We look back to these elections. I want to tell you that the 2025 elections in New Jersey and Virginia mean nothing for the 2026 midterms. Special elections in congressional races mid-year mean nothing to the direction. What happened in Georgia probably means nothing. I think it means a little bit more than those because it was more of a messaging test than anything. And of course, Wisconsin's already talking about, where they've lost the majority. They have an elected Supreme Court, and Republicans are ramping up to try to take that over again. These are these kind of things in these races that typically outside of the general elections of the every 2-year cycle, it don't mean a whole lot. But I do think that Republicans, after the Schumer shutdown, had nowhere to go. We didn't pick up on what we really needed to pick up on. We're still focused on political. It's not even, I don't want to say this because someone's going to clip this and someone's going to say, yeah, you should have said it that way. It's holding accountable those who came after President Trump and came after Republicans and came after Americans and came after conservatives and weaponizing the judicial process and weaponizing the justice process and the court process. And holding those people accountable because they never get held accountable. It's always Republicans. There are always bad apples in every group, right? Nobody is perfect. No, we're fallen humans, and nothing is perfect. But and I'm not saying that those things shouldn't occur, and the media certainly doesn't help because they want to focus on what's bad for Republicans. They always want to do that. They always will, no matter. If Republicans found a way to fund a cure for cancer, there would be something wrong with it in the eyes of the media. Something would be controversial. Something would be wrong. It would be somebody's fault. But I do think that the Republicans have lost their way since the Schumer shutdown on messaging. And I also think that the White House, as much as I support President Trump's policies, I think is really bullying a little too much when again, Congress holds the purse. Congress passes the law. The president is the executive who enforces the law and runs, agencies and the different things that the Constitution has for the president. And I think that's why we're starting to see a lot of these resignations. Marjorie Taylor Greene was always crazy. But what she said is true, is that there's this consultancy class and there is this elected class, and we get too comfortable. Or we're more worried about making money and winning than actually about governing. And that's the kind of government that Republicans and Democrats have fallen into over the years. And Trump in 2016 or 2015, before that, when he started to gain momentum in his first election, that's the reason why Republicans and Democrats kind of got shell-shocked by the entry of Trump to the race and his victory over, the convention for Republicans, and then, of course, the presidency in 2016, and then here again in 2024, 2025, and beyond, is because of that mentality and just the lack of keeping our promises and the lack of governing. And we're always one election away from utter destruction. Now, I do agree that the slippery slope, especially when, in my opinion, when liberal ideology, especially progressivism and socialism get in the way, we slide towards degradation of society. And this is the first time in a long time, I will say this in the positivity of President Trump, that we have finally had a firm stand on fighting back. We are fighting against men and women's sports. We are fighting against radical gender ideology. You do you, 74 genders, and you get attacked if you use the wrong pronoun. We've pushed back on liberal indoctrination in schools. We've pushed back on the hijacked DEI agenda. Not that we're against diversity, but we are against using DEI to screw otherwise people of merit of any race, color, background, gender, creed, or code from advancing or whatever because we have to meet a quota or we have to do this, which then can lead to dumbing down a process. We've been experiencing that, in the airline industry and some conversations that Charlie Kirk had. You go through this whole, like we're standing up against opening the borders and having unfettered illegal immigration. Like we're pushing back on that. And then of course, but everything's doomsday, everything's all this stuff. But, Republicans, when it came back to this last election cycle and in 2025, and then as soon as the Schumer shutdown ended, we just kind of like ran out of a message. And the Republicans are running out of steam and people are leaving. And really the way forward for Republicans to do anything. Now look, every poll today is worthless and meaningless. It means nothing. In fact, most polls until about the last month are going to be worthless. The only thing they're going to be good for is messaging and, riding a ship or what have you. But Republicans have to get back to the basics. Affordability in energy and in education and in healthcare and in groceries are a huge concern. And there have been huge strides. Egg prices are way down. Our Thanksgiving table was way cheaper this year than it was last year. There are some big wins, but one, we have to message it, and two, the process is not done. And we cannot focus on the Comeys of the world. We have to break through the media barrier, which is great about X and the power of social media that can bypass a media that will otherwise not tell the goodness of the story and the work that Republicans are doing to tell you the doom and gloom and press the buttons and help liberals win this election in 2026. And I'm not saying that this is the election that ends all elections, that this is the most important election of our lifetime, because you hear that time and time and time again. But it is important to vote, it is important to message, and it is important to ensure that Republicans remain in control if and only if we will actually see through the promises that we make. And I know that sometimes that's difficult because the U.S. Senate, you have to have 60 votes and cloture and these kind of things. But both parties have gotten these implacable positions where we make promises, we do 2 or 3 of them, and it's like, oh, we ran out of time, we have another election. And I agree, the House is elected every 2 years, the process is slow, government is slow on purpose so that people can't get away with things. I get that, I understand that, I support that in some circumstances, but the bureaucracy often kills good, timely, needed ideas. We have to hold the line on spending. We have to stop adding to the deficit. We have to stop letting Russia bully people around. We have to continue to hold people's feet to the fire on trade. We have to continue to help Christians in Nigeria. We need to keep helping people who are marginalized around the world. But it cannot come at the expense of America's national security. And we're going to talk about that here in a second when we talk about what happened in Washington, D.C. with those West Virginia National Guard members who were targeted and one killed. We're going to talk about it in the next segment, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But the Republicans' way ahead is to focus on affordability. It is to focus on serious legislative work. I have always said, when I was chairman of the Indiana Federation of Young Republicans, everyone, when they see Young Republicans, there's always a group of people who are obviously super serious, and there are several people who were really engaged to the point where one day it led to something else for them, whether they were elected office or whether they worked in the state house or the U.S. Capitol. There are ways, college Republicans and young Republicans, who can do that. But also there's a lot of folks that just see it as a party and get to meet people and all these things. But when I came in, my biggest, I wrote what was called a 5-year plan, and it was always something that we were looking 5 years ahead. So it looked beyond me as chairman, beyond the board that I served with. And every time we finished a year, we would always add on to that year. So it was always looking 5 years ahead. And one of the key tenets of that document was what was called seriousness of purpose. Seriousness of purpose in what we do. Yes, we can have fun. Yes, we can, have happy hours. Yes, we can have social hours, but we're here to learn. We're here to put boots on the ground. We're here to get elected ourselves. We're here to raise money. We're here to do just exactly what the party apparatus does, but with comrades of our age. Seriousness of purpose. And Republicans need to have a seriousness of purpose about affordability and education, continuing to push back on the degradation of society. All of these things we have to focus on. And if we don't focus on it, we are going to be in a bad way. There's going to be some tough races. And I know that there's always these Republicans out there, and I say Republicans kind of air quote, and I don't get long in this segment, so I've got to move on here soon, like the Adam Kenzingers of the world, who's no longer in office, and the Jeff Flakes of the world. And those are the Republicans that CNN will go to and MSNBC will go to. Why? Because Liz Cheney's, because they always can get on the news by just kicking the crap out of Republicans. And I'm not saying that there aren't things that need to be tweaked in the Republican Party, but the bulk of Republicanism and the conservatives, really, their heart is this. We have just got to get everybody on the same page about these topics. We have to stop listening to the naysayers that are on the extreme fringe of our party, those that are so moderate they're almost Democrats. And we've got to really focus on those issues. And I'm not saying that Comey shouldn't be held to account. I'm not saying any of these people shouldn't be held to account. But we have to focus on those things. And so the Republicans' way ahead is affordability, real world issues, state and federal legislative work and policy. That's how we win this next election. And it is most important to hold the Senate because they're the ones that put judicial nominees in place. And that's the biggest one. We need the House too, but we can really stop things and we can hold the line on judges in the Senate. And there's going to be a lot of combative Senate races, in Maine and in New Hampshire and in Georgia, where there's a vulnerable Democrat, and Arizona. Like, these are races we can win if we focus on the right issues and not be crazy about it. So anyway, I've got to move on from this one because I can talk about this for another hour, and it's not what you want to listen to. The second topic we're going to talk about, and it kind of melds with what we just talked about, was the shooting that occurred in Washington, D.C. of the targeting of National Guard troops from West Virginia who have been deployed to help continue to combat the crime in our nation's capital. And you can say what you will about this process. I talked about this many episodes ago, initially when the president was deploying these troops to D.C. and then potentially into further cities to help with crime and to help with attacks on federal facilities and federal operations. And I'll say this, I obviously one is dead. One National Guard member is dead, the female, and there's a male who is still in critical condition, and who knows what will happen by the time you hear this episode. But they were targeted by a man who, and I'm not using his name only because it's one, hard to pronounce, but more importantly because I don't like to give any sort of time or glory to cowards like this. But this gentleman was from Afghanistan, and he came here in the Operation Allies Welcome piece when President Biden disgraced this nation in his withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving Americans in harm's way, rushing out, leaving a bunch of equipment that then the Taliban and terrorists and other folks that were anti what we did there. Because again, we let them back in, and we did not do what was necessary and right to set Afghanistan up for future positive governance, and we left them all these helicopters and guns and all these things, but we brought back people. Both put the Americans aside for a second. We left some there, but we brought some home. We also brought some folks that helped the CIA and helped the military in different ways, whether it was intelligence or whether it was what have you. And we brought this gentleman back, and I think he ended up settling back in Washington State, if memory serves. And then he just drives all the way across the country and comes and essentially tries to assassinate 2 National Guard soldiers. Now, by the time you hear this episode, there may be some motive released. It may be now. The research that I did didn't seem like there was a whole lot of clarity on that. But one of the things that they say is that this gentleman had been vetted by the CIA for entry, or FBI, or whoever does all that. I thought it said the CIA and the military. And of course, we push for, when anyone comes from especially a combative country like that or a troubled country like that we should be vetting these people. We should be doing so as best as possible. And if we can't vet them, they shouldn't come here. But I think we also feel obligated because he helped us. But that does not mean because he helped us that he was an ally of America and that he should have come here. Now, I also agree that he probably would have been targeted by the Taliban, knowing that he had helped who they find as their oppressors, which was the United States and allied forces that were there for the last couple of decades. But coming to America and just resettling him when we probably still didn't know enough about him. It's very clear he didn't have a criminal record, all these things, but it clearly shows, in my opinion, that he was not really an ally of America, and who knows why he did this. But it's very, very clear that he should not have been in this country. And we talk about illegal immigration, and we talk about legal immigration, and we talk about helping people with for those in need. But these are the kind of things that, again, maybe it's one in every 100,000 people that we bring here that are going to, break the law so flagrantly. But it's very clear that this gentleman should not have been here, that he wasn't properly vetted, that the Biden administration brought him here and just let him go. And now he's perpetrated essentially what I view as a terrorist attack against our nation's capital and against our military and against our brave soldiers who are in Washington, D.C. Again, you can like or not like the reason why these soldiers were there. The fact is they were serving their nation, whether you disagree or agree with President Trump's actions to lower crime and to create a more active presence of law enforcement in our nation's capital for deterrence. These folks, these soldiers, were targeted. Why? We don't know yet. But the fact that this man, I believe he came here under false pretenses. I can't prove that. My gut says that he did what he did in Afghanistan for self-preservation. And then he came here and then he perpetrated this as the biggest just up yours to America by targeting and killing our soldiers. And he should absolutely see the death penalty, and he should not be on death row for 20 years. But this is the kind of thing. I am for legal immigration. I am against illegal immigration. I am against programs that cannot verify whether somebody is coming here with a background that should not be here when it comes to crime or military or a chip on their shoulder. They should not be here, period. And again, there's going to be so much more that comes out about this, but whether you agree or disagree with what President Trump's doing in D.C. with the National Guard, we can all stand here and say today unequivocally that this was wrong. This man should be justice should be sought to the fullest extent of American law, and including the death penalty. And we support our troops regardless of what work they are doing in the legal atmosphere in which they have the power to do, as the president has given them the power to do, in a lawful order. We stand behind every member of the National Guard, everywhere, every member of the military, everywhere. But especially the work that they're doing in Washington, D.C., it's very clear that because of the derangement that's going on in America, left-wing and this crazy ideology that we just have to bring anyone and everybody here, because they're coming, this man should never have been here, and we have to stop that. And I'm running long again because I don't have much time left to get this episode in under the wire. I want to talk. I have to stop there. I want to talk about Indiana's early legislative session for my Hoosier friends, and if you're not a Hoosier friend, it's still kind of important. Indiana is being pressured into redistricting. And I have told you on this episode or on this show in previous episodes that I think Indiana has good maps. And if everybody would play by Indiana's rules, we wouldn't be having this problem across America. We wouldn't have the extreme gerrymandering that we're working against in the Northeast, where Republicans on average are getting 41% of the vote and have 0 congressional seats in Congress from any of those states, Maine and New Hampshire and Vermont and what have you, Massachusetts. And so, we're not playing by the same rules. And so it forces us, like in Indiana, to potentially redistrict mid-cycle, or at the very least, certainly it's going to be different in 2030 at that census, 2031, when the General Assembly uses that data to redistrict again. But we're getting that pressure in Indiana. And so, the president has asked legislators and our Governor Braun, and Governor Braun rightly responded by calling a legislative special session to redistrict, and there was one other taxation item for them. And of course, at that point, the Indiana House of Representatives were like, yep, we're going to pass it. We got the votes. And the Indiana Senate said, we don't think we have enough votes to do this. We're not going to meet. Now, look, I told you that I trust the legislature to make the right call on this. And my opinion has shifted a little bit on this topic because, again, yes, Indiana's maps are great. If everyone followed the communities of like interest, not on racial lines, not on political lines, but making sure that communities are as contiguous as possible in these congressional districts that are of like economy or like location or like or what have you, that if everyone played by those rules, this wouldn't be a problem. But because we are playing against extreme, and it's always Republicans that are wrong. It's okay for Democrats to gerrymander. You don't hear one pundit on CNN saying, those Democrats shouldn't be doing it either in Massachusetts. No. They're hitting Texas, and they're hitting Missouri, and they're hitting Kansas Republicans, and they're hitting Indiana, and they're hitting North Carolina. That's who they're attacking, and they're not saying anything about those who have done it to a greater degree of severity. They have, and so you know what? When we don't all play by the same rules, you can't force Republicans and shame Republicans into playing by a different set of rules that hampers and limits us, and it's okay for Democrats to do it. That's my position. Indiana's maps are great. I wish we didn't have to change them. I wish the entire country played by the same rules of communities of like interest. They don't, and therefore, whether it happens now or certainly when it will happen in 2030 and 2031, Indiana needs to draw its maps to the same rules that everybody else on the Democratic side gets away with. I don't like attacking morality, lack of morals with immoral things, but I'm telling you right now, it absolutely ridiculous that we're having this conversation and that Republicans are the ones that are at fault somehow. But I digress. Indiana's legislative session is going to start early now, which means normally this short session, which is the non-budget year, which is an election year, goes January to mid-March. Now it's going to go December to mid-February, all because of this to get started. And I think they're kind of behind the gun and behind the eight ball. But what I want to say here is that the Senate in Indiana has decided, no, we don't have the votes, so we're not going to meet. I don't believe that's legal, and that's what they said. Now they've gotten enough pressure that they're meeting. And again, I trust the legislature to do the right thing. I obviously have my opinions, but at the end of the day, you cannot just say, I'm not going to vote. You cannot just hide. You cannot just shut down. And I'm really glad that the pressure came and that people came to their senses. If the vote fails, at least they voted. Now, there'll be hell to pay if the vote doesn't pass from other various things. I also don't like pressure from D.C. coming against Indiana and meddling in our elections, but several senators are getting primaried because of this stuff. It looks like probably several state reps are going to get primaried because of this. I just can't stand when other people try to tell us in Indiana how we're going to have elections and who's going to come and spend money and who's going to come and do that. I really don't like that. Well, this vote needs to be held. This needs to happen. Whether it happens now, it's certainly, again, these maps are going to get redrawn in a radical way in 2030 because no one else is playing by the same rules. And Indiana's session is going to be tumultuous. And of course, the media is going to tell you a narrative that's not true. And Republicans need to step up just like on the national side, and they need to lead, whether it's redistricting, whether it's affordability on energy and education and homelessness and groceries and all the different things. It can't just be redistricting. But Indiana's moving forward and moving early, and we'll talk more about what that looks like and means. Thank you so much for listening today. I appreciate it. MikeOnTheRight.com. You can listen to this episode and all those that came before it. Tell your friends, subscriptions, likes, 5-star ratings. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great week.